Welcome back to the Rollup TV. We are live today, Tuesday, June 3rd. Trump has just announced that he's launching a crypto wallet and a platform where you can trade, and he's encouraging people to buy Trump coin. Good morning, Rob.
Good morning. Yeah, nothing out of the usual here at the Rollup TV, bringing you the most valuable insights from inside the ecosystem and beyond. Trump launching a wallet that looks like a MetaMask clone. I saw an intern post of Trump's face front and center on the wallet. Is that real, Andy?
I don't think so, dude, but I did see the MetaMask clone wallet. It's just, I don't know. I just don't know where this is going to end, but it's pretty comical. So we just got a couple minutes to talk about some of the core topics today, and we're going to jump right into the guests. We got Anil, Afif, we've got Robinson, we've got Dougie, and we've got Lauren. So it should be a fun stream today with tons of awesome guests covering a variety of topics. First one's coming on pretty soon here, so why don't we jump right into what I thought was one of the more interesting posts of yesterday from a A16Z guy, titling that there is a death of the crypto foundation model coming. So this has been, for those who don't know, there's been a labs and a foundation model for a lot of these companies. Like when Robbie and I invest through our fund, basically what happens is we sign a deal with the foundation company usually, and then they control the token, and then the labs like the main contributor. I think this is because there's a lot better regulation now in the space, and so you don't need to do this bifurcation, and also because the foundation, I've heard that there's a lot of foundation employees who kind of just riff and siphon off a lot of cash from the labs and don't really contribute much, and also just it contributes to a bit of bloat in the company itself. So, yeah, Rob, what's your take here? Is this the end of the regulatory kind of restraint on crypto, or is this just the natural evolution of efficiency?
Yeah, ultimately it was a legal intermediary to try to work around regulatory frameworks. Now that we have more clear regulatory frameworks, I think it's more direct. You don't have to go through a loophole to do what you want. You can simply go right to the source. So I think this is a good move. I think we're going to continue to see more and more positive regulation that does bolster innovation and adoption. I think this is a positive move for the industry because, like you said, these foundations oftentimes don't do a whole lot. They're almost like token marketing departments. And we saw the token be responsible, the foundations be responsible for the token, the labs, corporations responsible for the protocols. Ultimately, these are two products coming out of the same company. To act like, these are two separate companies is a facade. Let's bring
Yeah,
them under the same umbrella, under the same roof. And I think a lot more benefits come from integrating those two.
I actually also think that quite a few of these are going to actually come into the U.S. I think they've been avoiding the U.S. for a while, so that should be interesting. But look, I just think that like cryptos as an industry is getting far and far more mature, and this is just kind of like the natural evolution. So,
I I have
um,
one more note there on them coming to the US because I think you're right, but I think this ties into a conversation we had yesterday with Felix from Forward Guidance, a podcast hosted by Blockworks, which is that we're on the cusp of capital controls, and I think there is a reality where there is more significant taxes that are put on businesses that are domiciled outside of America that wish to do business inside. And digital businesses, crypto businesses are a little bit more difficult to draw that line, but I think this is going to end up extending to digital and crypto businesses for those that are domiciled outside the US and try to do business inside the US.
I see it as well, and I think it's a good trend. And I think, I mean, even just here in New York, it's kind of becoming the capital, right? So,
The idea is
um,
that it forces these companies onshore,
yeah,
right?
exactly. I mean, all the regulation has basically forced them offshore now, which I think has been bad for the US. But all right, shifting gears to the Ethereum news today. What was great is that we actually saw the Ethereum Foundation put a post regarding their new model, and so the kind of gist here is that they're basically breaking up the individual roles in scaling Ethereum and focusing on with 2 people for each role. So there's like scaling the L1, there's L2s, and there's like 1 or 2 others. And basically, the thing here that they also did was that they cut a lot of the spending on the research department, which I think is indicative of a larger trend that is like, yo, there's going to be like I think this whole like research meta and such, people are shifting to such a strong product oriented approach in the space now that there just seems to be like this infra exhaustion, research exhaustion, and it's likely that the foundation was spending quite a bit on this as well. I mean, we know that they invested 20 million into you know, the ZK EVM efforts and stuff like that with Alexander Hicks and their group. And so, yeah, I mean, look, I think that this is a really positive step for Ethereum, and we will see more of these kind of abrasive, urgent actions happen as Ethereum kind of responds to the competition, but also realizes that there's a lot of moving parts under one umbrella.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to hosting some members of the Ethereum Foundation on this show. Alexander Hicks has been an advocate of ZK EVMs and formally verifying the EVM. He's been on the podcast, and I think we'll have him on the show in the coming weeks. One particular thing from this article announcing protocol that Ethereum posted on behalf of the foundation was that there are now 3 strategic goals that have split from the protocol research and development group.
Mm.
These 3 goals are scaling the L1, scaling the blobs, and improving UX. And what I found, particularly, something to note here is that if you scroll a little bit further down in the article, they rephrase the 3 goals again, and they say scaling the L1. This is led by Tim Bako and Ansgar. Scaling L2s, Alex Stokes and Francesco Diamato, and then improving the UX, Barnaby and Josh Rudolph. And so
I
they
mean, the
really
comments look bullish, man. Like
absolutely. And
everyone's
and so just
excited.
the thing to point out here is that scaling the L2 is directly equates to scaling the blobs. And
Yeah.
and as there's an increase in blob capacity, this supports the L2. So look, they basically took the community's feedback, they heard it, and they implemented it. And now they're putting scaling the L1 up there right alongside the importance of scaling the L2s and the roll-up centric roadmap.
Yeah, and there's your outline there of the L1, L2, and the UX and all of it being supported by Dankrad. Um, yeah, man. I mean, look, I think ETH's price action has been pretty good relative to Bitcoin. It's been holding up. People are even looking at like the Sol ETH or ETH Sol chart. So look, I mean, I think Ethereum's it has certainly reached its it's kind of like trough in terms of its like mind share and sentiment, and is making the right moves to go up in terms of product, community, etc. So, I mean, I was just pretty excited to see this and wanted to cover it.
We got another couple minutes here before Anil from Delphi joins us, and so I think there is something else here to mention, which is that Justin Drake put out a piece, and he's noted for writing these long form Twitter pieces, where he sort of outlined the idea of native rollups, and he's been a
Yeah.
strong advocate for native rollups, and he actually described the paradigm that we're going to soon enter into, where native rollups become feasible, and that's done by snarkification of the L1. And the Ethereum L1 actually becomes the first native rollup because it runs the EVM. It will have this precompile, and then it's also a based rollup, right? Because it uses the L1 for sequencing by definition. And so I think what the Ethereum Foundation is realizing, and we realize this through our conversations with Celestia and through our conversations with some of the ZK teams like Risk Zero, is that these roll-ups start to become these amorphous blobs in space. Everything is just a blob of state, and they're all just sending ZK proofs back to one another. And so I think the L1 really has no differentiation from the L2s. And it's just another blob of state that is going to be interoperating with L2s via ZK proofs. I think that goes between L1 to L1, as well as L2 to L2 and L1 to L2. And I think the Ethereum Foundation realized this. They said, look, we're not just going to be a proof aggregation chain that is used for settlement. We're going to have to scale the L1 in order to compete for user relationships and consumer relationships that are front facing. And so I think, again, this is a demonstration of the fat app thesis. This is the way that the industry is heading. And the L1 realized that it has to compete with the L2s from an app's perspective in order to maintain market share.
I mean, I think also people like the answer to the whole like parasitic question has become very clear. I think people are now like, okay, no, let's just bring value transactions, DeFi back to the L1. I think that people have uh, kind of had that question answered for them. And so when you think about what Ethereum's end game is going to be, we often hear that it becomes the entire internet, or that it'll be home for a lot of the financial activity. What kind of didn't work was the whole, okay, Arbitrum is Ethereum, Base is Ethereum, because we saw that these chains, they really just wanted to kind of focus on their own sequencer fees, their own ability to basically generate revenue, run a real business. And so Ethereum kind of like outsourced a lot of the uh, a lot of the development, if you will, to kind of other places rather than kind of internalizing it, or like a lot of like the tech upgrades. Just seems like that's it. Like the vibe that I'm getting is like Ethereum is coming home type of vibe. So I'm excited about it. Up next, we do have Anil from Delphi. He'll be joining us here shortly. Looking forward to chatting with him about what the latest is at Delphi Digital. Um, Met Anil for the first time quite a while ago um, in New York City, actually. And yeah, I mean, have some questions about what they're doing at Delphi Digital, where they're seeing the market head, what's coming, stuff like that. So, and yeah, should be right. He should be in the mix here shortly. But yeah, Rob, any closing thoughts there on the Ethereum side?
Yeah. I, look, I think this is the coming out moment for um, I think this is the coming out moment for the Ethereum Foundation. Like, we're going to continue to see this restructuring in multiple departments, and I think we're seeing that in the protocol and research and development department. I think we're going to continue to see that across the Ethereum Foundation. You know, they're a big ship in the sense that they've got a lot of resources and they've got a lot of people and personnel that are working in the foundation. And historically, uh, this has been a foundation that, again, just doesn't really prioritize the community. They've kind of been steadfast in their direction towards building something.
I don't know about that. I feel like they have prioritized the community a lot. I mean, that's why the community is so strong. It's because so many
Let
people
let me
did well.
rephrase community feedback, right? Like for so long, and maybe it just took up until this point, right? And it's about giving them credit now. But for so long, people were telling them they had to compete with Solana, they had to scale the L1. They wanted these things, and for so
Yeah.
long they were focused on, you know, look, we need to keep uh, solo stakers alive. We can't scale the L1 because it's going to increase the node requirements, and that's a non-negotiable. And
Yep.
people are like, look, we don't run our own validators. Like, we stake in Lido, right? And that's the majority of staked ETH. So I think, they are starting to take these things to heart because people want to like Ethereum, but they were a bit detached from community sentiment for a long time. It's good to see them start to take community sentiment into account.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I think that the ETH price is going to reflect that in a matter of time. And I also have just seen a lot of Ethereum saying as of recently on Twitter and whatnot. I mean, there's the usual suspects, and then there's the recent resurgence in the new, like, era of being like, okay, like, it's kind of just coming full circle. Like, okay, we had roll-ups, and it worked. Like, people over-index on the fact that, oh, interrupt wasn't shipped, or oh, it didn't work exactly right. But like at the end of the day, it worked. It's just a matter of actually solving out how to make that work longer term, and then how to compete. Because the fast chains now just came up, and um, it's been a interesting journey for Ethereum because right, like we got in 2019, 2020. I kind of found that everything was happening on Ethereum, right? Like this one when we got into like on chain stuff, right? Because in 2017 there wasn't really much on chain for us, um, and Ethereum was like the only thing, the only place to operate. It was the only place where things were happening, and so it grew enough of a moat in terms of its community, its overall financial stay, the amount of stake, the market cap, and so it's done a good enough job of being able to solidify that. But it's just a matter of kind of like where we go next and how this thing scales. So
Yeah.
that's where I'm at.
Yeah. Look, I want to like Ethereum. I think most people do.
I'm
The
bullish.
I think so too. I'm trying to think from, a new entrance perspective, right? If I'm
Yeah.
an institution, why am I going to buy Ethereum versus something like, one of these up and coming L1s, right? Maybe it's just that it's been around longer, it's more Lindy, and that is going to take the cake and handle it anyway. Um, I'm struggling a bit to find an investment thesis on behalf of an institution other than
Oh,
real
come
world
on. No, I think
assets.
it's like the
Stable coins and real world assets, that's really the underpinning of what Ethereum is doing these days and the value proposition that it's providing.
well, where do they want to deploy, right? That's the answer, or that's the question. And Solana caught enough of the actual RWAs and stables to be able to kind of compete, which I think caught a lot of people off guard. So anyway, up next we got Anil. A bit of a back room set up there, but appreciate him hopping in. Let's get him up and let's talk about Delphi, everything in between. What's up, Anil? Good to see you, man.
Hey, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Good to have you,
Welcome to the
man.
show.
Yeah,
It's been a long time since you gave us some sage advice over a coffee in New York City, man.
no, definitely. We'll do one this summer.
Are you down in PR or are you up in the city?
Yep. I'm gonna be back in the city. Honestly, in like Thursday, so I'll be there all summer. We'll hang for sure.
Sweet, man. Well, I was looking at Twitter, man, and I saw some one of your infamous merch boxes. The
Yeah.
the eye for design. I think Simon posted it recently. Some care package. Why does good merch matter to you, man? Like, what is the importance of getting these care packages out there for the community? And like, there's a bit of an art to these thank yous and merch boxes.
Yeah, so there's some interesting lore here, funny enough. So before Delphi, quote unquote, made it, most of our good friends and people, outside of the crypto space just saw us as a merch company. We just had really good merch. And that was kind of like our pride and joy. And I think like, honestly, the way I think about merch is like how you do anything is how you do everything. So, when we think about merch and like, having like the symbol that our employees kind of wear, obviously hats, everything like that. Yeah, we just want it to be good quality. We want people to be like proud and happy to be wearing it. And yeah, honestly, it's been like we kind of try and put that care into like every little thing we do, which like, sometimes it is good, sometimes it's bad because like perfection is like the enemy of progress. But we definitely try and strive for that.
Well,
Yeah, man.
it's indicative of the brand, and I love the saying that how you do one thing is how you do everything, because you start to see that touch of identity, and that's what makes you guys you, and you start to see that run through the work that you guys do, the merch that you guys do, the conversations that you have. There is sort of that element, that aura that makes you guys special, and you put it as like a little sauce into everything that you do.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny enough, like, we did all that merch without expecting to, be on the Rollup TV talking about it. And, yeah, here we are. We'll definitely need to get your guys' addresses so we can send you a box afterwards too.
Well, I'd love to dive into all your design, artistic abilities, Anil, but I think there's some crypto and AI stuff to go over, man. You guys have been, I mean, absolutely crushing it since I would say, previously, prior to your actual AI month, you guys had been doing a lot of investing there on the ventures arm. And then kind of post that AI month, I feel like you guys have captured that niche better than pretty much anyone else. You guys have just recently ran this DAGI House Accelerator Cyber Fund. You had a bunch of sweet elite type of people, Ben, Jasper, Tarun, Emod, Shriram, these types. I mean, we we haven't actually been able to dive deep into it, and I'm sure our audience is kind of new to it. So we're just super curious about TLDR. What advice or insight have you gleaned from interacting with any of these, people? What are the key takeaways from DAGI? Kind of what's the state of investing in this sector?
Yeah, so that was our Delphi Labs company, and they've absolutely crushed it. It was cool because that accelerator was the first time that both all three actually, Ethereum Foundation, Base, and Solana all teamed up together to kind of support. They threw out some retweets, got us like over 400 applicants. Out of those 400, the Labs team and Cyber Fund went through. They picked around a little bit more than a dozen team, I think like close to 20. Flew a bunch of these guys out to Lisbon, sat with them in person, and out of those 20, they basically picked 8 that they were just like, hey, these are the teams, projects, ideas that we want to back and kind of go like full force and dedicate not just our time but all other Delphi resources to, whether it's like design. Gabe on the legal side, obviously he's leading MetalX, which is like an incubation that we spun out. So yeah, honestly, it went really well. They actually just posted this morning. I was just looking at the tweet with a whole recap of like all 8 of the projects. I highly recommend people go check it out. I think we did a demo day last week. That was probably our most successful demo day to date. We had like 150, investors, other entrepreneurs all listening in on it, asking really good questions. We had breakout rooms afterwards. Honestly, it was like hard for me because, after, the whole demo day, you had to like pick 1 or 2 projects to go out and talk to like basically all of them. So yeah, it's been really cool. I think on this like AI note too, like the way that we think about it is, and we've definitely been going as deep as we can in this space, and we just want to get deeper and deeper because we think to be the best anything investor, not just crypto investor going forward, you're going to need to have kind of this really good understanding of what's going on in this like really fast evolving world of AI, right? So yeah, we do have another pretty big announcement coming out hopefully later this month. Obviously have a lot of work to do, but definitely on this AI front, I think you'll see it on Twitter and everything like that. And, happy to come on with some of the team to chat about it afterwards.
Yeah, man. So you mentioned that there was a couple projects that you guys had to kind of like pick to orient yourselves around and focus on. Is there like a general like problem or like a part of AI that is most compelling from a acceleration point of view or from an investment point of view? Like what were like the sectors or the actual kind of projects that you were most bullish on?
Yeah, you know what? I've said this a number of times, and we obviously we have around a little bit under 100 people across all 3 companies at Delphi. But I'd say that like some people definitely have way more pointed opinions here. For me, when we first started getting involved about like 18 months to 2 years ago, I'd say I was in the camp of like we should just invest in every area of this because I really had no idea where value was going to accrue. I still think it's just super early, to be honest. I think really just like you want to do in traditional investing anywhere, you just want to back really strong teams, really strong founders, and to be honest, have them figure it out and kind of like ride the coattails of the intellectual capital they kind of gain like solving those problems, right? This cohort kind of like mirrors that, to be honest. I'd say like out of those 8 projects, there's very little overlap. You have projects that are focused on encryption like Matlock. You have projects that are focused on actually creating like a UI UX for people to navigate markets and like financial information like True North. You have companies like FewStats, which is like focused on almost becoming like an Expedia of all these like AI payment APIs, right? You have like a bunch of these companies, whether it's companies like Stripe or credit card companies like Visa, as well as obviously a lot of crypto companies like Coinbase that are creating all these like agent payment kits. And I think I thought FewStats was really interesting because they're basically kind of aggregating that, making it one API for any project to go out and immediately offer all these payment options and essentially like being the Expedia for it, right? So a lot of great ideas. Honestly, learned a lot just from listening in on the demo day, meeting a lot of these teams. Just super excited about it.
Yeah, one of the things that's super exciting on the AI crypto front is the ability for AI to pay AI. And you mentioned kind of these payment APIs, and that whole machine economy feels like it's the perfect niche for crypto. Is there any of those projects that are working on that problem in particular?
Yeah, like I said, I think Stats was like probably my favorite approach to it in a kind of differentiated way where, yes, I think a lot of people in crypto take it at face value that it's like, hey, listen, agents are going to use crypto to pay, agents with each other. I go back and forth on this. I think like, we've talked to Visa a lot or we're potentially working on something cool with them, as well as, even Stripe, right? Like these guys have made it really easy for agents to use even things like credit cards and stuff. Obviously, there are still benefits of like, no chargebacks, very low fees, instant transfers, etc. that I think crypto will kind of like be, at least in my case, like the premier kind of destination. But I do think that like, you can't discount like the access to, everyone has credit cards. Not everyone's onboarded on crypto yet. So I think things like Stats is like kind of like really interesting there where they kind of, they kind of say, hey, we don't give a fuck. Like whatever is easiest for you, we provide it all, right? And I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, man.
Very
I mean, there's this rapid development in AI space that feels like crypto is like lagging by it by like 6 to 8 months, like in the developments, in the actual progress. So it feels like you guys are kind of like walking both sides. I saw that the fund also invested into, it wasn't Neuralink, it was Noose Research. I think that one, right? And a couple others. So yeah, I just think that there's a lot of progress on kind of like the Web 2 front too. And it seems like you guys have your toes in the water there as well, as much so as in the crypto space.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely leaking into like a bit of the announcement that we have in a couple of weeks, but maybe I can, tease it. Like we definitely hired up a, team and expanded the team to really get deep into the AI side. I think like,
Sick.
what
Congrats.
yeah. Well, one thing that you've kind of like harped on too, which is like I don't think just crypto is like, not falling behind by any means. It's just that it can't keep up with how fast AI is moving. I have this thesis that like, I think if you pause AI development today, you would actually get meaningful kind of like efficiency gains in businesses all around the world. But like, we see this on our research side. We've integrated AI within our portal. It's actually, for better or for worse, kind of become the most used feature, which like sucks because a lot of people don't read reports anymore. They just use our like AI Oracle to like help summarize, they question it, etc. But the thing is like, every other week, basically, we're talking about what else can we do with, AI for our, product, for our company and everything like that. And I think it's just moving so fast that like, the big disadvantage is like integrating a model or, upending your business and kind of like integrating some type of AI features or optionality. And then like, weeks go by and immediately it's like displaced by a whole new model or a whole new feature set. And I think that's like probably the funniest thing about AI is like the thing that is hurting it the most right now from being actually implemented across all these companies, whether it's Web3, Web2, is that it's moving so fucking fast. So yeah, I think like even with us, when we first started Delphi, back in 2018, as a research firm, one thing that we saw was like crypto was moving at light speed, right? Like DeFi hadn't really been invented yet or anything like that. And that's what was so exciting for us to kind of like start a research firm to keep tabs on it. This is the same way we're feeling about AI right now, which is like it's just moving at light speed. And like, even with the whole team dedicated to it, you can't keep up with all the news coming out there.
Yeah.
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 It's crazy.
Web2 companies, AI companies at large are facing this where they have to innovate themselves before they get innovated by someone else.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
You guys are across several different verticals, and you kind of described that philosophy early on. How you do one thing is how you do everything. Is there anyone that you see out there at other firms or that you see in the industry that shares that philosophy? And if you could poach some people, bring them onto the Delphi team, is there a couple people that come to mind, maybe two or three?
Damn, yeah, that's a really good question. I'd say that like when we first started getting into the investing space, we our kind of like eyes were wide open at like how low the bar was of being a fund in this space. And so I think a lot of the funds over the years we've kind of like not been impressed by or not thought that they've moved the needle. That being said, I think there are still a lot of great funds out there. I think this cycle like Dragonfly's been absolutely crushing it. And I think like yeah, I think like each fund kind of has their own type of culture, their own type of way of doing things. And, one thing I've kind of said both internally and sometimes externally as well, is that like for us, we're not when we first started Delphi, I think a lot of people, as when we started a research firm, they said, oh, okay, are you trying to be the Bloomberg of crypto? When we started a venture firm and our goal was to be the most value add fund in crypto, they said, are you trying to be the A16Z of crypto? And then obviously when we started Delphi Labs, they said, are you trying to be like the Y Combinator of crypto? And to be honest, along the journey, I definitely was like, oh yeah, that's probably like a cool analogy to think of. And I think over time, one thing that myself and the other founders have realized is like, we're not building like the Bloomberg or A16Z or anything of crypto. We're building the Delphi, right? And I think that's how I think the other top tier funds in the space probably think as well. Is like they're building their own. And I think like people who get really caught up in this competition of like, hey, how can we do that thing that fund is doing better? You're probably already losing, right? And I think that's one thing that we've really leaned into at Delphi, is just like do things our own way. As far as like people to snag, yeah, that's a good question. I'd say that like, there's probably 6 to 7 people on my list over the years, and a lot of them, basically all of them know who they are, if they're listening in on this. Most of them are not, at funds or anything like that. Most of them are just people who either work for themselves, don't need to work anywhere, and I think those are the best type of people to hire. A lot of the people at Delphi don't need to work here for a paycheck or anything like that. They work here because they want to be part of like this greater hive mind, and scale their ability to impact crypto, right? And I think those are the type of people that I'm always looking out for. People who are like perpetually curious and are perpetually passionate about the space. Yeah, so I think there's 6 or 7 people who know who they are, but maybe I don't leak that alpha here. Yeah.
All right,
maybe that's part of the expansion plan to come.
Yeah, exactly. Of the AI expansion. One big part of Delphi's has been Tommy. He's been tweeting a ton about AI, has been kind of on the forefront. I'm pretty sure he's building his own agent, probably still is.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, like, what does Tommy bring to Delphi? What is his unique advantage in the world of investing and building?
Yeah. Tommy's the best. I'm seeing him in a few weeks for one of our other partners, Pierce's wedding. So I'm super excited. It's been too long. But I think like, one thing that Tom does, Tom, to your point, Tommy was like the first person at Delphi who was really pushing this AI push, like really early on. To be honest, it was kind of annoying. I was kind of like, Tom, we have a lot at hand. Why are we focusing on this other stuff right now? And to be honest, he really nailed it. As far as the agent goes, I think that is one of the coolest things that Tom's really been like working on at Delphi. And, very similar to what I was saying earlier, when he first kind of shipped, and basically for people who don't know, we've basically been working on this agent for, probably a year at this point. Like at least a year at this point, which basically has fed all of our investment memos, all of our, a bunch of our call transcripts, all of our research reports, obviously, even our Twitters. And basically it has like a good judgment of like what Delphi finds interesting, what Delphi doesn't find interesting, etc. And so that way people can submit decks to this agent, and this agent can not just provide us insight into like, hey, this is a project that out of 10 we think 7 or 8 out of 10 you should talk to, but it also provides feedback to the people who provide decks. And I think one thing that we did at the beginning of this year, which I think we should do an update on soon, we just got a lot going on, but we basically give it $1 million and said, hey, you pick over the next 3-4 months on which projects we should invest in. To be honest, the bad thing about it was like, it was not great at figuring out how much we should invest. So we gave it $1 million, and it was like, hey, you should invest, for example, like you should invest in these 5 projects. So basically would have split that into 200 grand. Whereas like maybe one of those projects, like we would have a lot of conviction in, would want to invest the whole $1 million. Right. So we're always iterating. Tom's like really been leading the charge there. He's been adding model. And I think that's what, really speaks to like how we learn at Delphi, which is like, we need to get our hands dirty. We need to be building. We need to be using these things ourselves. If we're not using it, we're not going to be learning at the same rate that we could. So yeah, that's been a lot of fun.
That is hilarious, man. Anil, thanks for your time, man. Keep crushing. See you in the city soon. Yeah, man, you guys have been a big inspiration on a lot of fronts for us, with the fund, with the media side, and more. So appreciate you, man.
Yeah, man, love what you guys are doing. Keep it up.
All right,
Thanks,
buddy.
man.
Take care.
Dude, the $1 million agent aping into absolute just nonsense on. I would love to see a portfolio update.
Yeah, it sounds like we'll get one soon. And he dropped a little bit of alpha on Delphi's expansion, which I think sounds really exciting. I mean,
Yeah.
again, this goes back to like, look, there are multiple areas where we're going to start to see employees that are AI. We're going to start to see
Yeah.
AI that is, on the scale of 10, 20, 30 manpower, maybe more, right? And I think companies are going to look a lot different once that starts to happen.
Yep. I agree, man. We are getting ready to bring Afif on. Let's get him up here. And good to have him in. I know we've been moving some stuff around. We got Afif. Afif, good to see you, man.
Yeah, let's make
Yeah.
sure Afif is unmuted in the background, in the meet as well, so that we can hear him. And we're gonna make sure that we get him going here. Welcome to the show.
Hey, sorry, is it working now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks for
How you
having me
doing,
on.
man?
Yeah, doing well.
You guys are shipping, aren't you?
Yeah, we're working.
Nice, man.
Yeah.
Man, we got quite a few topics about Ethereal, Athena, USDE, but I just like to understand a bit of the lore as well as to kind of how this all came together first. I mean, so obviously Athena had this idea to build Converge, and then you guys wanted to build Ethereal. I mean, I would just love to understand your perspective of the lore of kind of how this whole Converge chain, Ethereal, institutional approach came together, and then we have a ton of good questions for you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so a lot of it is kind of like just in Athena's camp. So I like we're just building on Converge. Like so, Ethereal is an app chain on Converge. Like my own personal story is I've kind of been a big fan of Athena since the launch. Like it was kind of so like my backstory is I spent a bunch of years at Synthetics, like building on chain derivatives, and like the initial reason I was excited about building derivatives on chain was to do like a similar style of stablecoin to like Lemma UXD back in the day, where like the challenge was always liquidity, but I was like, this is an awesome use case for building composable on-chain perps. So it's always been like super close to me as like a product and very cool. And so like obviously like Athena's launch was massively successful. So I kind of just got very interested in like building in this ecosystem and building products that kind of like support the long-term vision.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So Ethereal is actually an app chain on top of Converge.
That's right. Yeah. So
Understood.
yeah. So
Okay.
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No. Okay. So it's this all-in-one USDE app for traders, for kind of farmers, institutions, etc. But it's built on top of Converge as its own kind of execution environment.
That's exactly right. Like I think regardless of where Converge landed in terms of technical stuff, it's not. I think we kind of all like, and we're aligned with this with Athena in terms of like just focusing more on like product than like specific like tech. Like ultimately, it's like which stack is going to get us the product that we want. So we had always planned to be an app chain on Converge or whatever chain is the Athena ecosystem chain, because it just makes sense to be on your own block space for a product like this.
Got it. And why was this so important to build on Athena, which is obviously, leveraging the USD stablecoin, and they're doing so through funding rates, and that's how, interest is paid. What made it so that, this product, Ethereal, was so important to build on Athena? You couldn't build it anywhere else.
You can build it anywhere else, and obviously, a lot of people have built everywhere else. Like I think it's exciting to build in the Athena ecosystem because USDE is an exciting product. Like I think it's brought something on chain that a lot of people have always. I think every bull market, I always see people saying like, "Oh, you could get like however many APY doing the basis trade," but very few people actually have exposure to it, right? And so Athena like productized it, put it in DeFi in a way that like lets you use it, it like leverage it, borrow it, whatever. So I think it's like very cool, and it's kind of created this good, like a really powerful like lever for the ecosystem that can help like bootstrap an exchange in a way that's kind of like difficult to do otherwise, right? So I think USD is a very unique product because it's like a synthetic dollar. It's not a backed stable coin. The
Right.
collateral backing it is very different. It's backed by like these like managed positions versus like fiat in a bank or anything like that. So I think there's some interesting synergies with like an exchange using USD, but also it's just like the market best rewards on your dollars, right? So it's like kind of like the best thing to, if you were going to start building something for traders, it's a great starting point.
Yeah. And I mean, one potential aspect that I think about instantly is that one cool thing about DeFi is that you can have your settlement or your kind of your base asset as being yield bearing. And so, there's a world where on Ethereal, when you're doing perps or you're trading, you're consistently coming back to this USDE. It can be this yield form or this yield bearing form of collateral, or of if you just want to sign off for the weekend, for the summer, etc. That's one thing that I have in mind. With the rise of basically Hyperliquid dominating the perps DEX market now, there's been, I think, a shift in the way people are thinking about building on-chain exchanges, whether it be with the token side or just in general with the product experience. I'm curious how you view Ethereal in the landscape of perps as it is today. The centralized exchanges, Binance, etc., Bybit, and then decentralized exchanges, Hyperliquid, DYDX, and these. How do you kind of see this landscape as a whole and the evolution of it? And then how does Ethereal fit in and find that unique differentiation?
Yeah, totally. Like it's a great question. Like I think it's probably been about a few years since like trading on chain like leveled up to where it started to feel like you were closer to trading on Binance or something, right? Like I think like DYDX was quite good a few years ago, and it was like 0 to 1 in terms of like what anybody had experienced trading on chain before. It's like it's fast, but obviously it had its limits. There's a lot of debate around like which direction it went versus where it could have went. I think Hyperliquid has also been massively successful in kind of like pioneering like the community getting to take part and own like certain like functions that normally would be like externalized or something like that. And like I think like that kind of falls under the umbrella of like the product has to have something net new and interesting that users will keep people coming back to use, right? So like like people getting to like participate in like HLP and like like plus EV from liquidations. And like I think that was something that was interesting. Like Hyperliquid also like pioneered like doing these like high perps, like pre-launch perps, like all these things that are interesting. I think like ultimately it can just be one cool feature that like way back in the day when Binance let people like trade gas from the Neo chain, right? It was just like one little thing and people were like, whoa, amazing, I'm going to trade there from now on, right? So like I think ultimately it's like the name of the game is always like build something new and interesting. It could even just be one cool feature that is like a wedge for people to try and get into your product. And then like from there it's like, okay, well now like Hyperliquid had their wedge, maybe a couple. Now they have the whole hyper, EVM ecosystem, and they're trying to have all these ways that everything plugs in together. And I think the idea is that like if there's enough entropy, like we have all these new products that are totally different. And I think like that's not just the Hyperliquid game plan. That should be everybody's game plan building on chain. Is you want to like create weird new combination of things because it's open and transparent and they can plug into each other permissionlessly. That's kind of like the idea. And like we did a fair bit of this back in Synthetics, so like it's really difficult to execute on, but it's like totally worthwhile, to pursue.
Yeah.
You guys mentioned that you're obviously starting with perps, but there's a bigger roadmap here. You also talk about the wedge, right, to kind of get your foot in the door and start that momentum. And then there's a bigger picture. Maybe you could allude to what is part of the bigger picture. What is coming down the pipeline post perps?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really common thing that like someone will ask me when I tell them I'm working on Ethereal, and they're like, "Oh, like aren't like dexes like way oversaturated already?" Right? Like I think like even going back a couple years, like I would constantly see like new decks flying around for like, "Oh, we're building like it's either like we're building this but on this chain, or we're building that," but so like but like as like our kind of like North Star is like, okay, well, what still does not exist in the marketplace today, despite people saying it's highly saturated? So like I think most people like who are like on-chain power users, like they use everything out there. They'll do like all their borrow lend like typically on Ethel1, right? Like on Aave, right? Because that's where everything is. That's where the most liquidity, maybe a few other like L2s or something on Solana, but it's generally all in one place. And then spot trading will be like kind of literally all over the place. Like it's Aerodrome, it's UniV3. I think Hyperliquid is now like the first like spot club like in all of DeFi. And then perps is like, used to be super cyclical. It's like DYDX, GMX. Now most people seem to be trading on Hyperliquid. But it's all always in a different place for each one of these, right? And then like, don't even get me started on RWAs. So like, I think like the idea that what we want to build is something that gives you all of those in one product that's like going vertically integrated versus horizontally integrated, right? So there's a lot of products out there that are trying to do the horizontal integration strategy. It's like a super app, but it's like plugging into all of your favorite DeFi apps on different chains, and they're trying their best to abstract away the fact that you're on 5 different chains at once or something like that. And there's pros and cons to both, but I think ultimately, like you can, there's a lot more you can achieve when it's all in one vertically integrated product, which to my knowledge hasn't really been successfully scaled on chain.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that basically what you're describing is this, I mean, it's addressing this fragmentation that exists, right, between all these different chains and then all these different applications within the chains or applications on separate chains. And I mean, it basically seems like you guys can plug into the let's call it the DeFi on-chain power user community, and then also have this link to the RWA issuance hubs through Converge, and like the institutional side there. I know that you said don't get you started on RWAs, but just curious, like how that issuance kind of hub works or looks, and like how that Converge integration enables new RWA possibilities for Ethereal, which are perhaps more difficult for other DEXs or platforms to have within their product suite.
Yeah, for sure. So like I think right now most people don't know even how to, and there's probably not even much availability to get access to any kind of RWA product on chain. It's very difficult, right? And I think it has been for a while. There's some, like I think the closest is like just getting treasury yield on some stables or something like that, right? So I mean, again, like a lot of this is kind of like outside of our umbrella. It's happening between like Athena and Securitize with Converge. But I mean, I think like there's also a lot of positive catalysts, of the last like year that are going to make it a lot easier to, bring these products on chain. And I think like Converge, Athena, Securitize, Converge, like their vision of kind of like threading that needle of like making it institutional friendly, but also on chain. It's like, to me, it looks very powerful. And if I wanted to build, in an ecosystem, that is like one of the big reasons why I would choose and am choosing to build it in the Converge ecosystem, because you kind of get like easy interoperability with like all of those features, like, as soon as they are available. Right. So like, that's one of the things that we're really excited about, like having kind of folding that into Ethereal, whether it's like, through other, like PTs from Pendle on RWAs, or like maybe the RWAs themselves, using them as collateral, spot pairs, whatever. Like, I think there's a lot of exciting things that haven't really been experimented with that we can, do.
And I think that's part of the strategy here. Like you said, you probably get this all the time. Like, why build another DEX? You guys are building an L3 on top of Converge, on top of, right, Celestia is underneath, I believe, maybe the L1. And so, again, it's like, some of the common things that we hear in crypto from being around is like, well, L1, L2, L3, L4, L5, right? Like, what was the strategic decision to build the L3 on top of Converge?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's definitely, like, from a lot of people who have followed like the scaling roadmap for years, there's definitely an aspect of like, please, bro, just one more L, right? Like, this is make it work. But like ultimately, like I said, like we definitely approach it from like strictly like, what do we need to create the product we want? And I think increasingly there is bigger focus on that more than like what infrastructure, what tech stack sounds the coolest. So like ultimately, like I don't think it's super critical, what is it as an L2, as an L3. Ultimately, it's like a roll up, right? And I think like the roll up model is like very powerful, but also, trivially verified like computing servers that are like on chain. I think like that vision like resonates a ton with us. It seems like it's the best way, like on an application specific chain, to build the product that we want. That's like both highly performant and highly composable with like other products in the ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the issue with some of the DEXs in the past has been around the liquidity more than anything, right? Trying to find where to get out those first LPs and users, and then in addition to that, actually nailing down the infra stack for that is, as you said, it's just a roll up, it's just a chain. But I think about it, it's just an application on block space. That's all it is, right? People have this apprehension right now towards chains, towards L2s in general. I think like again a little bit of infra exhaustion, people wanting to move towards apps, but then people like are very excited about something like Hyperliquid or something about some of these other applications, and then they realize that that's also a chain. So it's kind of an interesting dichotomy there. On the liquidity point, though, You guys have recently been on the season 0 campaign. So you guys have put up about 1.2 billion, I think, right now. We actually had Steven from DeFi Dojo on yesterday, and he was giving some alpha on this being one of the better current DeFi yield strategies, depending on his predictions for the Ethereal token launch. Now, obviously, we won't get too deep into all of that. I'm just curious, like when we go from here with this $1.2 billion of liquidity as part of the season 0, I think we're getting close to the end here. You guys have had Aave, Pendle, some of the larger DeFi protocols participating. How does this transition into liquidity for the Ethereal DEX? And just generally, how are you thinking about solving that problem? Or even if you have advice for other founders who are looking to solve the liquidity problem when it comes to these types of DeFi products?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think like the season 0 deposits, I think more than anything else, just speak to like the enthusiasm of people in wanting to get involved and participate, right? So it's kind of just like a queue, a line of like, here, if you want to get involved, like tell us you want to get involved, and like put put your money where your mouth is, so to speak, right? So like there's a lot of enthusiasm in getting involved, and like I said before, there's a lot of lessons to be learned from the last few years in terms of like bootstrapping liquidity by letting the community participate, creating, building those sorts of products, like not just like an automated LP, but also like building other infrastructure around it, like credit and things that make it easier for people to come in and LP. So I think like there's definitely an element of that. Like it's kind of the easy part to like have a lot of the pieces in place so that you can like, initially have some liquidity. The hard part is obviously like making it worthwhile for the liquidity to exist in the long run, like to be present there, which is obviously about like trading flows and making. So it kind of ties back into like what we were saying earlier, where it's like if you want it to be sustainable, ultimately you want to just go down all the list of reasons why people would ever leave and like just cross them off one by one and be like, okay, like you might go somewhere else to get this product. We're just gonna build that product so it's here. And like so it's like kind of like a virtuous flywheel where it's like, okay, like we have some liquidity at the beginning, some people are interested in trying it out, we retain some of them, we retain more liquidity. It's like the usual cycle. Like so it's really hard to execute on, but I think ultimately like if you want something that'll last like years and not just like one hype cycle, it's ultimately you have to deliver like all of the features that users want and will continue to want, as they figure out that they want them.
And
Yeah,
if you've been, yeah, go ahead, Andy.
No, I'm just curious, like, who do you think your users are? Is it institutional people? Is it traders? Is it just heavy, kind of seasoned on-chain power users? Like, who's your user base?
I think it's like everybody, like on-chain power users, like centralized exchange users, like anybody in crypto. Ultimately, you want to start with like just like capturing the crypto native audience, and then kind of try to expand from there, right? So I think like there's a few needles to thread. One is like trying to build on-chain while also making it institutional friendly. The other is like I think we have a lot of natural alignment like with the Athena community, but like a big contingent in the Athena community like is like yield seekers, so not necessarily active traders, but we're also building a product that is a place to trade while you're getting yield, or loan while you're trading, like those borrow while you're trading. So I think there's like a lot of needles to thread. Ultimately, like we want them all to come and trade. If you're mostly a yield seeker but you occasionally trade, you can just park your capital in Ethereal, and when you need to trade, you could just use it as collateral, right? So like I think like a really popular trade, I guess it was earlier this year and last year, was like depositing SUSDE into like Morpho or whatever and levering it up. Like I think there was a lot of automated looping tools that popped up. And like I think one cool thing is like you can do that, but you can also have that just be your account collateral, and you could just trade against it directly, right? Like so if you need to open positions like spot, perp, whatever, that's your account, right? So I think there's a lot of, like I said, like once the feature set is diverse enough, there's a lot of opportunities to like court all sorts of users that we wouldn't have expected to court initially.
Yep. Well, one more question for you, Afif. You had mentioned sort of the playbook to create this virtuous cycle is you build a product, you start to track why people may leave, and then you build that product too so that they don't have to leave your system in order to go get that. Is there any teams that you've seen do this particularly well in this ecosystem, that they ended up just iterating their product to such an extent that it became extremely valuable to their end user base?
I mean, yeah, like I think if you just look at every successful like product, I think a lot of them have gotten there through iteration, right? Like, so like obviously like Hyperliquid iterated a ton with their users. Like Athena has like worked tirelessly to like support every integration that people would want to do with USDE, so that like they like literally will partner with everybody so that everything is available. Like I think iteration is, it doesn't guarantee success, but it's like obviously super, it's really important. But yeah, like, I think ultimately like you kind of just have to stay nimble and follow along with like what is the latest thing that people want, and have a system in place that's easy to adapt.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Afif, thanks for your time, man. Thanks for joining. Excited to see Converge go live, as well as Ethereal. I know a lot of my yield farming friends are pretty active right now in pre-deposits, and are looking forward to everything that you guys have come in. So keep up the good work, man. Cheers for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was good chatting.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
See you soon, buddy. Peace. Yeah, those guys are gonna crush. They're gonna do very well. So
yeah,
up next
so
we got
too.
Robinson.
Yeah, let's make sure Robinson's ready before we bring him up, and we got his handle cut off. Maybe we can fix that as well. But Robinson's a good friend of the show. What were you going on about there, Andy?
No, I was just excited to see that. And I think, I mean, yesterday, Steven from Dojo was like, you know, if they have a token launch that was like in the couple 100 million, then the yield is going to be a really, really, really good opportunity. That amongst whatever the current PT yields are. So yeah, I mean, they have $1 billion in deposits, which is like, they're kind of like a silent beast right now amongst all the yield farmers. So anyhow, let's get Robinson up here. And let's talk about some interop with Interrob. What's up, man?
What's up, guys? It's good to see you all.
Are you in the big city, man?
I am. I'm in the city. We actually just opened an office, and I should have been there today, but some things came up. But yeah, I'm in New York.
Was the things the bright sunny day, or?
I mean, I've been promised this New York summer, and it hasn't been here, but now it finally is. But no, it wasn't.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's been a bit rainy and a bit nicer this week, though. I'll tell you that. We got a bunch of questions for you, Robinson. You've been on the institutional grind, you could say. Wormhole has firmly positioned itself in that realm. We could just start with a quick update. You know, like what's going on? What's the latest? Yeah, how's the appetite? What's the latest?
Yeah, I mean, you're very right. We are focusing a lot on institutions, and I think making really, really good headway, which I, of course, can get into a bit more. I'd say all the biggest right now, we're seeing a lot of funds come on chains. It's pretty kind of rudimentary real world assets, if you will, money market funds. We're seeing private credit kind of take off. I know I've been on here before talking a little bit about it, but we've actually seen a lot of progress since then, particularly in DeFi, which I think is exciting. But for us, we're still just kind of replicating this playbook that we have. The way Wormhole's structured, the institutions really like it. It's kind of like in line with what I call the practical era of crypto, right? Like, what is too many validators or too little validators? What is too much decentralized governance, and those types of questions? And for us, our security model works well, so we've seen a ton of success. That being said, we can't ignore the what I kind of see the TradFi and the DeFi still, even though it's kind of crossing over. We can't ignore the DeFi, so focused a lot on stablecoins. Nothing new there. That's like what everyone is talking about for good reason, though. I think it's a narrative that's not being chased just out of like, you know, how we kind of do in crypto sometimes as an industry. It's for real, and it makes a good bit more sense to plan your like business goals around that. So just continuing to focus on adoption in both DeFi and TradFi, and then also revenue. I think we're finally going to migrate from being just a token protocol to focusing on revenue, ARR, MRR, those like foreign acronyms that we haven't quite adopted yet.
Yeah, that's particularly important. I think several projects are facing a similar question at hand, where they're looking at the landscape and they're actually seeing this double-edged sword where turning on maybe a fee switch or some monetization strategy to achieve MRR, ARR is actually detrimental to their long-term strategy of adoption. So I'm curious, from your standpoint, how do you balance these two things, from trying to bootstrap an ecosystem and generate some significant adoption over time versus, providing some value to token holders or stakeholders and generating revenue in the near term?
I think you're honing in exactly on the problem. So I think it's really good that we're kind of calling that out. Here's the thing: is that a lot of we came from markets before where most protocols, we can just, from an investor point of view, we can just call them alts, right? Like you were able to launch a token. That token was able to see a lot of success. I think over time we've seen kind of alts like that initial TGE strategy not pan out as well. And what's happening is then the VC appetite will wane, so to speak. And then what happens is the liquid fund side is what gets way more interesting. And I know liquid funds has now become a buzzword in and of itself, but I like to think about like these investors with maybe a little bit more of a short-term time horizon, right? VCs can invest and think maybe 4, 5, 6 years. And when you talk to these liquid funds, the thing they care about the most is the fundamentals, right? They want to see that you have. They care a lot about supply and demand. Maybe that's the first thing, right? Like how much of your token supply is unlocked. Like that's a pretty simple one, but I wouldn't I wouldn't under index on how much they care about that. But they care a lot about like fees, revenue. How are you going to kind of make the protocol sustainable over time? So I think there's maybe a little bit of a sweet spot where and this is kind of what we did, maybe just kind of putting the proof in the pudding, where we kind of waited a little bit of time, right? We said, for us too, in particular, we were building for years before we even launched a token. So we kind of had a long time to build adoption, build up the brand, these kind of these things that are extremely valuable to have staying power. And then we felt more comfortable to launch revenue. So I don't have an exact answer because I think every protocol is different, but I think it's going to be harder to push off revenue longer. And I think that'll be the case for all of these protocols. And so they'll all kind of have to adopt it. And this kind of goes in line also with what I'm saying about like crypto's practical era, just to tie it back. Like all of these kind of basic principles that we've been able to ignore for a while, I think are coming to a heel. I even think, for instance, I'll go out on a limb and say like CT as a whole isn't as maybe as much of a requirement to be successful as a protocol as it once was. And this goes with validators, this goes with governance, all these different things. I think we're kind of rethinking the model and maybe maturing a little bit. But look, I think it's a challenge if you're starting to launch a token now. When do you launch revenue? When do you not? But the thing that is the most important still, besides revenue, is that like network effect, making sure your default alive, making sure you have adoption, etc. So if I were to summarize my feedback, it's maybe wait until you feel like you have a good bit of adoption, you have something you can eat off of in terms of whether it's brand, integration, etc., and then turn on fees year post TGE, if you will.
Yeah. It seems like if you kind of go for revenue too quickly, there's just going to be consistent competitors who are just basically are willing to basically bite the bullet, undercut you. And I mean, frankly, that's kind of what's been happening in the interop landscape for so long. Like there's these tweets that are like tribalism of chains is gone, and like, oh, we've got chain abstraction and interop, and these institutions don't care, but I think they care, and I think this tribalism is going to stay along. So it's like you're fighting battles on multiple fronts as a protocol, founder, as a visionary, right? It's like you're fighting the economic front, the community front, the competition front, the product front, etc. So kind of fighting a lot of battles at once. And then at the end of the day, the sentiment of the entire market still kind of dictates from the macro all the way down the performance usually of the token. So not an easy job, man.
Yeah, not an easy job at all. One thing I would say though is that, like, I definitely think tribalism is still alive within like the kind of the DeFi native crypto sector. But at the end of the day, like I hate saying institutions. Let's maybe define like what a lot of them are right now. It's like these large funds, right? Really, they care about AUM. They don't. They launch on chains that have a lot of activity, sure, because that's an indication of the metrics that they're ultimately beholden to. So like they really want to see AUM go up. And so when you think about that, the best way to do that is to spread is like they have the liquidity, right? They have the problem that most people in crypto or teams in crypto are missing is like that kind of like liquidity jolt to make anything successful. They do have some of that. They have access to the exchanges, capital, etc. But they want to spread it and get more across all these different chains. So they will target the most popular ones first. Totally agree. And they see the tribalism with Solana, Ethereum, etc. But they view crypto as an investor class, and so they want it to be as many chains as possible. That's why I think what BUIDL's on like 7 chains now is because each of those chains then is going to push and drive as much adoption of that as possible, and their AUM ultimately goes up, and that at the end of the day is really all they care about.
Very interesting.
But it's a lot to balance. You're right. It's a lot to balance.
Who actually owns these who actually owns these relationships with institutions? Because you've got a couple players in the space who've been bickering lately about different things, and like, is there a team, or is there like a way that you have a really strong relationship with these funds, these institutions? Like is it like, I'm just trying to wrap my head around like what a typical BD experience is like in crypto, right? Versus like going out and actually meeting these people where they are. Like, what's your thoughts there with regards to owning these relationships with these institutions?
Yeah, maybe I'll get to the answer to this question, but one observation I think is interesting, and it kind of goes back to like owning the relationship with institutions, is that I think all protocols, especially like, maybe not blockchain, but like middleware and those types of things, are realizing that in a relationship with the user is one of the most important things. And a lot of people know that, right? Like that's the most sticky thing. We get that. But when you actually like take use cases, you can kind of start to see it happen. And I think a good example, we saw it accelerate. I think it was last week, Solana's conference in New York. Jupiter launched JuPlend, right? They want to be a DeFi like power front end. There's already a big lending protocol on Solana. They don't care. It's Camino. You see like Uniswap obviously is an AMM, then launching Intense, wallets. You see Infinex coming from the other side, right? They're saying, we're going to start at the user and we're going to aggregate everything. And I think, we're no different. We see that, we have Portal obviously as a front end. So I think like everyone is always in crypto racing because you have this like commoditization of everything, racing to grab the user. And I don't think it's necessarily any different when it comes to institutions. I think a lot of the sticking points or at least the gateways today are these like tokenization platforms. It's where the kind of KYC, KYB happens. It's, they're kind of processing your actual investment, et cetera. It's still pretty manual today, if I'm being honest. I actually went end to end through the process quite recently. So I think that the relationship or the bulk of the institutional or the fund manager relationship still resides on these tokenization platforms. That's why you're seeing, I don't know, I feel like they've cropped up overnight. It's like AMMs in 2020. Like there's just so many different tokenization platforms. And some of the value props are just like, I'm tokenization platform for this jurisdiction in this country. I have this large family office behind me. That's enough differentiation to launch and for me to have a business. So it's kind of interesting. Like, I think, follow kind of what the market's doing. And I think that is where the main part of the relationship happens. So for us being more middleware, we work closely with the leading tokenization platforms, or at least that's what we kind of target. Obviously, Securitize is a close partner, as I've come on here and said before. But that's, I think, where a lot of at least a relationship exists today, and that stickiness exists today. Could that change? Absolutely. But I think what's an interesting observation is just how many tokenization platforms are starting to kind of like come out and say they have different value offerings, et cetera.
Stablecoins are definitely an important piece to this because these are the tokenization products that the majority of people understand and can own once there's proper infrastructure in place. And these are extensions of credit off of something like a treasury fund, right? Like BlackRock's BUIDL. And so the question is, looking at BlackRock's BUIDL and the billions of dollars that they have in tokenized treasuries, a very common thing to do once you have these reserves sitting on chain is to launch a stable coin. Do you think BlackRock is going to launch a stable coin based on BUIDL?
So I'll
will
start by
they
saying,
use Wormhole?
I'll start by saying I have absolutely no clue. I'll speculate, but this is not based on any inside information that I have. But I think BlackRock is pretty strategic, right? I think they're I mean, of course they are. Like they wouldn't be where they are today if they weren't. But I think right now they're still like they have the most valuable resource, right? They have capital and time, I guess maybe two valuable resources. So they have the ability to just watch, see how things pan out, and then kind of like get things at a much later stage, if you will. So I think that they're already kind of making certain moves, right? They're obviously very involved. This is public information, very involved with Securitize as a large investor. So like there's, them kind of like putting an iron in the fire, if you will. I think there's another large tokenization platform called Libre. They've tokenized a few funds. I think BlackRock is also an investor there. So I think right now, maybe if I were to just, from my perspective, I think what they're doing is they're saying, okay, where are there strategic opportunities for us? Maybe taking some sort of stake. And I think the next move is definitely, could be some sort of stable coin. But I think that they would probably want to see maybe some sort of stable coin regulation get passed before. I mean, because tokenization, a lot of this stuff is we're just saying like, yeah, it's a security. So there's not much like new gray area, so to speak. But I think when it comes to stable coins, they're probably going to want to see some sort of like regs or these acts passed.
Right.
Ultimately, I mean, we've been talking about them for months, maybe years at this point, before I think that you see a meaningful like them on the cap table type headline. But it's cool to see things like I know Athena has USTB already, that's BIDL-backed stable coin. So we're already kind of seeing that. But yeah, it's a good question, but I think they're going to need to see some sort of clarity before anything meaningful happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was just at StableCon last week here in the city, and it was crazy. Like every small private bank wants to launch a stablecoin. Some already have, but are waiting on the Genius Act and some of the other regulatory clarity to be able to like put it out in the wild, they said. But I spoke to at least like 5 people from private banks or like, maybe like fintech financial services companies. They were like, yeah, we want to launch a stable coin, basically just provide the yield back to the shareholders in some capacity. And, just like undercut Tether and Circle and just be like, yeah, our stable coin pays you 3%, but we're going to keep 2%. And like, that's our business. So yeah, I mean, a lot of fugazi going on, but also a lot of like really, really strong appetite for launching stablecoins.
Yeah, I think one thing's cool too. I was talking to a builder recently that's using Wormhole to kind of like we do a lot of stablecoin settlement. So like I'm a merchant, I want to accept USDC on X, Y, and Z chain, let's say Polygon, but the user wants to pay in USDT on, let's say, Sui, right? We will facilitate kind of that settlement in the background, kind of like a VisaNet, if you will. But what I think is pretty cool is like stable coins, or is like almost like it helps you. I think M0 did a good campaign recently, like everyone's a bank, but like you can kind of have this engine to make money in a certain way and then provide this social layer on top of it. So for instance, there's like a social application, imagine an iMessage, where you can bet with your friends in app, use a smart contract to set up whatever the bet is. And then like you can just pay each other. There's no fees or anything. It's very like iMessage type experience. And then the actual like game provider or the social media provider makes their money by you obviously custodying or leaving some of your stable coins on the platform, then making yield, et cetera. So like there's actually like a cool next layer that I think can happen from a lot of the stablecoin infrastructure that I think we've been talking about for a while, but now might be a kind of a better time or a more mature time to see some of that.
Yeah.
And what you're
Very,
talking about
very
is
interesting.
peer-to-peer electronic cash, the title of the Bitcoin white paper. And Satoshi didn't foresee smart contracts on top of some of these primitives, but that's what you're talking about to help facilitate some of these transfers. And so in that spirit, we're seeing the rise of several new protocols. Hyperliquid is one. Do you have any of these on the roadmap, bridging from Solana to Hyperliquid, ETH to Bitcoin? What are some things that you have on the roadmap?
Absolutely. So I think like what I'll say where Wormhole's really strong is obviously the institutional side. And I've said this before, it's because of our security model. However, there's principles in blockchain that do ring somewhat true, right? If something's pretty decentralized, it can be slower in certain aspects, right? So for Wormhole, we have a security model is very decentralized, and so it's slower to expand to chains. I think that's where we're a little bit like, maybe if I were to be super intellectually honest and critical, I would say, we could be faster at that. We just came out with this protocol upgrade that effectively makes the actual verification point modular. Why does that matter? Without getting too technical, it enables us to connect to chains much faster, right? So whereas maybe we could connect to 3 to 5 a quarter, we can now connect to 10 a quarter. And so that, when it comes to Hyperliquid, and maybe I'll just even take a quick aside, the thing in crypto that's interesting is like chains also is a red herring, right? 50, 60, 70 to 120 chains. I know some interop protocols tout. That's great, and we want to do that as well. But when you actually look at the data, I think it's, I don't quote me on this, but I think it's something like the top 12 chains do like 90 something percent of the actual activity. So when we're actually thinking about where it matters, a lot of, we tend to cover that. Now, Hyperliquid you're bringing up is obviously the one that we care about a lot. And we were going to be there day one. I think just one thing to call out, and this is totally a decision on the Hyperliquid team. We connected chains if their node code is open source. So we have like a big open source ethos here at Wormhole. Obviously, I'm talking about practical era, being a little bit more open to maybe some centralization of validators. How much governance do we want to do? These types of things. So I feel like it's an okay discussion to say maybe not everything has to be open source. I feel like I have to be maybe intellectually honest in that, right, as well. And so we had to think a little bit about Hyperliquid and them not being like the normal, upstanding to our normal security principles. I think we have a good solution around that. We've been working a lot with the team, really good team over there. And so we have a path forward sooner than you might think. So the same type of firepower we bring to Solana. I was actually at Accelerate. I said,
Yeah, I
think
saw
we've
that.
done 11.4 billion since inception. And, for context, obviously that's over all time. But for context, like Solana's TVL is somewhere around 9.2 billion. And so we're going to bring the same firepower to Hyperliquid. Obviously, we're talking to, potentially about RWAs there, et cetera. I know the unit protocols, talking to those guys are focused on that as well. But yeah, we'll be there way sooner than you think. And we're really excited.
Robinson, one last one before you go. You guys just brought Doge over to Solana using your native token transfers. What are your top 5 assets, memes, or tokens that you would love to bring to Solana next through Wormhole's NTT?
Oh, that's a good question. There's so many. So I'm starting to lose track of how many adopt NTT. I remember, honestly, like a year ago or over a year when we launched this, like if we got one a week, it was the most exciting thing. Now it's like the list, I see the list, it's like 5, 6 a week. A few I'm maybe excited about that I know top of mind. Red, obviously, Redstone. They also expanded their Oracle product with Wormhole, which I think is really cool, to Solana. So they use Wormhole to effectively send price feeds to Solana, which I think is like a really cool use case. But Red token, obviously, there. Doge has been great. I want to see more stables. So we've got AUSD with Agora. I want the transfers to go live there. Start getting more AUSD to Solana. We've got, if you look at the top 50 market cap, one thing I think that's interesting is a lot of the UTXO chains, proof of work chains, have been historically really hard to get assets to other chains. Doge is a really good example. Bitcoin's a really good example. Zcash is a really good example. So I'm really excited about like that cohort of assets that has kind of seemed like they've been on an island for a while. So focused on those a lot. But yeah, stables, UTXO assets, and AUSD. Let's go.
All right, Rob. Well, thanks for joining, man. And we'll see you in the city. I'll have to swing by the office and come hang. I heard you guys got a studio as well, man.
Yeah, please come by. We do. We're leveling it up.
All right, boss man. We'll see you soon.
See you guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Robinson. See ya.
Peace. Up next, we got Dougie, the investor at Figment. That was good, man. I mean, Wormhole has done such a good job of positioning in the institutions. Now, what I think is going to continue to happen with the interop protocols is like positioning at that point of tokenization. That's what Wormhole was, or that's what Robinson was pushing on. It's like finding the actual gaps for where the tokenization is happening and then getting into those. We didn't talk too much about the competitors, but some of them are doing well as well.
Yeah. Next up, we got Dougie from Figment. Pretty excited for this one because Figment's doing some great work. I remember, I think, seeing Dougie on stage at a conference way back, maybe in Istanbul. I think we got Dougie in the stage now. He's ready to go. So let's bring him up on stage. Yo, welcome.
Yo, what's up, guys? How goes it?
What's up, man? Just asking a VC about what VCs are doing these days. Just trying to get a little catch up here.
Oh, can't believe you brought a VC on. Can't do that nowadays.
Man,
I'm just fucking with you guys.
Right back at you, man. We've moved past a lot of the hate for VCs. It was a little sketchy there with the low float, high FDV dynamic, but it feels like we're past that. Do you feel like the sentiment has improved in the VC landscape?
I think so. I mean, it's definitely above the local bottom, it feels like. I definitely think like the low flow high FTV phase was like a weak point for like VC perception. And rightfully so. Honestly, like I wrote a piece kind of like criticizing a lot of like the bad externalities of low flow high FTV. Also pointed some like bad externalities out for like fair launches. But Yeah, I think rightfully so. There was a lot of criticism passed on. I think like what brought me into crypto was clearly not what was happening for that entire period of time, and it wasn't just VC's fault. Honestly, I think it was a lot of different people's fault. But like I was pointed out as like a bad direction for us to head in because, yeah, I don't think anyone was winning during that time. Maybe the people that sold OTC, but besides that, everyone was kind of losing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, dude, you put out a banger tweet, saying more founders should ask VCs what their on-chain activity looks like. I think that was pretty spicy. I honestly, just from a personal lens though, right? Like doing on-chain transactions in like 2019, 2020, man, I probably did thousands, and it's slowly kind of gone down. But I assume that your point here is that if you're out of touch with what's actually happening from a UX and from what people are actually using, then it's hard to it's hard to reason about things that are actually investable.
Yeah.
What's your on-chain activity look like? What who's LARPing, Dougie? Who's LARPing here?
Who's LARPing? I mean, I think a lot of people are. It's honestly shocking. Like I mean, myself included, my whole team, we're all very active on chain. I think for us, like we try to make sure we're not like going over the top with it because we do have jobs to do. But honestly, like I mean, what got me into crypto was just like being a user, getting super involved in DeFi and stuff, and just like falling in love with it. And then like the way my brain works, I just want to figure out how it all works, and so that like led me going much deeper over time, and then eventually just like made sense to become like a professional investor, I guess, in all these things I was using. But yeah, I mean, I spend time in the trenches of all realms. I spent a lot of time on Solana, a lot of time on Hyperliquid, time everywhere else. Really, I think I just enjoy doing it. And like, my perspective, like from two angles. Like one, as an investor, if I don't understand the market I'm investing in, then I'm probably going to be a bad investor. So actually, trying to be a user, talking to people who are using these things, deeply understanding what's happening in Telegram groups, like all of those things are all super informative to like what I choose to invest in. And the second thing is like we do a lot of early stage investing. Like we're very involved with teams from like the ideation standpoint, product design standpoint, so forth. And being a user of these products actually allows us to give like really deep and nuanced feedback to teams. Where like if I didn't use, different dexes, different whatever, like I would be just giving feedback that is not grounded at all. And so if we're gonna do our jobs, like again, I know VCs sometimes get a bad rap, but like we try our best to like be as hands-on as possible and like actually like support our teams any way we can. And what we found is like our biggest value add is just like giving them user feedback at all levels from like day one. And we couldn't do that if we're not users. So that's why we place such a big emphasis on like being on chain ourselves. Again, like we moderate it, of course, but like I definitely do at least like I don't know, 25 to 50 transactions a day easily. So that's kind of like my approach there. In terms of who's LARPing, like, I don't know, I'm not going to call out names, but I think you kind of see it like as different cycles evolve. Like the guys who were once very active on chain in the past, they probably either made it or like kind of got out of touch, and then their takes kind of resemble that. And so I think there's like certain people at certain funds who have big followings, talk a lot, and I see their takes and I'm just like, I don't agree. You don't sound like you're actually in the trenches right now. And so again, I'm not going to call out names, but there's definitely some people out there who I would consider in that category.
Yeah, we won't put anyone on the spot. I am curious, 25 to 50 transactions a day or a week. I forgot the cadence there, but what are some of the more active applications? What do you see out there these days that you particularly enjoy and you see where your activity is?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I feel like everyone talks about it all the time, so I'm being a broken record, but like Hyperliquid is awesome. I think a big reason for that is like I don't really use centralized exchanges. It's kind of an ideological and philosophical
Yeah,
thing for me.
same.
And
Yeah.
so beautiful. Yeah. So like Hyperliquid gave me access to like pretty liquid markets for perps and also like spot trading other things now as well. That previously I didn't really have access to, honestly. And so I think like using that, I'm not a great perps trader, to be honest. Like I do okay, but like I'm definitely not like up there with some of these other guys you see. But it's just a great product, and I think like really has shaped this cycle for a lot of people. And so I'll always give credit where it's due there. I definitely am pretty active on Solana. I have a Jupiter tab open a decent amount of the day. I use that a lot. I use Camino a lot, and then of course like there's like the Aves and like blue chips of the world. Those are like bank account, so I don't like check them that nearly as often, but like I definitely think they're great products, and like there's things that I can trust to leave money in for a long time, and like Aave I'd put in that category. There's others as well, of course, but that one stands out to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's been kind of similar here as far as like having a hot wallet on the laptop or on the phone for when your group chat pings you with a meme, and then having like more
Yeah.
secure multi-sig hardwares for different stuff, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
Don't need to get too deep into that. That shit gives me the EBGBs talking about it publicly, to be honest.
Same. Especially after recent
um,
stuff. Yeah, let's move
yeah,
on.
dude. Are you going to Cannes?
TBD. I'm trying to figure that out.
Okay, yeah.
Are you guys heading
You
there?
should go, bro. It's gonna be fun.
I know. It's just I wish it was in Paris, but that's my own perspective.
But then you
I don't
get
know.
robbed.
That's a good point. Actually, good point. After seeing what's happening in Paris, maybe it's good it's not there.
You
Man,
might
I saw
run into Macron's wife out there.
Yeah, the grandma. I saw a tweet today from Eddie from he's the CTO of A16Z Crypto. Put out this tweet about the it's time for crypto to move on from the foundation model. So this guy Miles Jennings wrote a piece as to why it was necessary to have separate companies when making these decentralized projects, which I think could have some air quotes with network tokens. But now we can cut complexity and accelerate development without compromising decentralization. Rob and I talked about this a bit as far as maybe potentially onshoring some of these to the US as a result of more favorable regulatory clarity. But more so just from an efficiency and kind of company bloat perspective. So, yeah, man, just curious your take on this when experiencing working with these different foundations, right? Because from the fund side, you typically invest into the foundations, and then the labs, or the labs will spin out the foundation when it's ready to launch the token. Yeah, man, what's your take here? Is this the end of the foundation era in crypto?
The end, I think, is TBD. I think one thing that I always try to keep in mind is like we do have 4-year administrations in the US. And so like to say something is the end is sometimes like very short-sighted because like we don't know what's on the other side. But I do see like a trend towards like this definitely changing from the way it has been. And I think it's a positive change. I probably won't get into the nuance like that Eddie did of like what governance looks like, all of these things. So like I'm not a governance expert, admittedly. But I do think like foundations create a very difficult like incentive model and oftentimes misalignment because you have like this core team, and that's the team that we usually meet early on, invest in, and then when it becomes time for a token generation event, this team basically has to split, and it becomes very odd in terms of like who stays on the lab side, who stays in the foundation side, how does compensation work, who is actually doing different roles. It's like just a very difficult thing, I think, for teams to approach, and takes like months to a year to actually like do in full. And so I think like eliminating that whole issue is like, in my opinion, a definite like improvement. I think there's like tax stuff, there's governance issues, all of these things that need to be sorted out. And again, like not really my place to say what exactly all that means. But I do think like I want crypto companies to be able to operate like traditional companies. I shouldn't even have to even make this distinction. They should just be companies. And if you
Yeah.
have a token, you shouldn't have to do all these weird, like, you shouldn't have to jump through these hoops to basically do that. And so we should be promoting revenue. We should be promoting like people to be able to have access to that revenue and like invest in tokens that actually mean something. And so anything that steps in that direction, I'm wholly an advocate of. That's obviously like we're in crypto, so we should be an advocate for that. But I also just don't think companies should be required to launch a token either. Like if you want to just maintain, just not have a token and maybe go down tokenized equity route, like you can do that as well. Like, there's multiple, I think, options that we're approaching as things change. And so yeah, I'm a fan of like the general direction this is moving in. Again, I think there's a lot of complexity here, and I'm not going to say it's the end of foundations, but I do think foundations as we know it are already changing and will continue to change. And I'm optimistic that like structurally it's gonna be a lot easier for entrepreneurs in our space to launch products and capture value however they want to.
Dougie, it seems so obvious. Like you have to have, like you got to have revenue. It's a business, right?
Yeah.
And the guest before he was Robinson from Wormhole, and he was talking about launching revenue like it was a new product, which again seems so obvious. But the counterfactual to this is that sometimes monetizing an environment or an ecosystem early on will stunt its growth. And if we're trying to build the network effects of a really thriving ecosystem, it's sometimes too early to turn on that fee switch. And so if you're looking at this kind of from an unbiased third party view, what is your analysis as to when is the right time to turn on the fee switch and launch revenue without stunting the growth of your ecosystem?
Yeah, it's very tough. I think this goes back to like that classic like Silicon Valley scene where they're like, wait, revenue? Like you don't want to have revenue. Like revenue is the worst thing because like now you're no longer selling the dream. Like you have like data points to point to for like how much your company is worth. And so it kind of goes back into that, which is a thing that applies beyond just crypto. But I think crypto most notably like has things that sometimes trade at insane multiples that are pretty hard to defend. So it's like particularly viable here. Timing wise is tough. I think like ideally, I actually would like to see companies approach launching a token from the other direction. Like it's the hyperliquid model where you launch a token when you have PMF and you have revenue that actually like reinforces the value of the token you're launching. I think like I started seeing price to earnings ratios, all these things like just come to the spotlight once hyperliquid did this. It's very hard to do it the other way around for exactly the reason you're saying. Like if you're a token that is trading at an insane like price to sales ratio, whatever, like, and all of a sudden you turn on a fee switch and it's $100 a day, that's going to be very bad for you. And so I hope that like people who are going to launch tokens and have real revenue get revenue first and then launch the tokens. I think it's a better model. But if you're working backwards, like obviously you may have launched a few years ago and it's hard to like change the past. Um, you should be finding ways to become revenue generative and maximize that. I think like I heard Robinson talking about it, like Wormhole's thinking about it. I think many other teams who already have tokens are as well. And so ideally they find ways to make money. And then when you turn on the fee switch and it gets like, reflected in the token price, hopefully it's a good thing. But if not, like I don't know. I'm a believer in revenue and like having tokens that are backed by real values. I do always think there will be a speculative premium, even in like traditional equities. Like companies are based on future cash flows, not on past cash flows in many ways. And so there will always be that element to it, and there should be. But I do think companies should be striving towards like maximizing revenue. And now that it looks like the regulatory scene is going to actually allow that to happen in crypto finally, rightfully so, there's more of an emphasis put on it today. So it's a good change in my opinion.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'm just wondering like how much of a priority investors are placing on it, right? Like from your lens, when you're getting pitched now for different infra deals or application deals, are teams coming with a direct like is there a stark difference between the way teams are approaching their business and tokenomics compared to let's say like a year ago even or like 3 years ago? I'm sure. Like I feel
Yes.
like at a time it was kind of like, well, okay, we're gonna figure it out, right? At some point, but that doesn't fly anymore. Like, what's been the key differentiators that you've seen from founders? Like what has been the key? Like okay, we're doing it this way, but no, now it's we're very clearly thinking about it differently.
And any founders that you think have done a particularly good job of this?
Yeah. So I guess touching on Andy's question first, I think absolutely I've seen a change in how founders pitch their projects, even early stage. Like we do a lot of pre-seed investing, and that's usually like could be years from when actually anyone uses these things. But already I'm seeing like because when on infra at least, like which we do a lot of, like it used to always be like, oh, we're building this beautiful tech. It's going to be massively, better than anything that exists for XYZ reasons. But like, you would never really go into like the why this appeals to builders, why it appeals to users. Is always just like this is a massive efficiency gain. Of course, it's going to win. Um, Now we're actually seeing people talk about the why that's going to win, which is like these builders need this, these users need this. We will provide them with this. There will actually be volume, flow, whatever that looks like in this equation on these like protocols. And so that's a big difference that I see early stage. Like people are actually thinking about their customers right away. Whereas in the past, it seemed like it was like, let's build this tech and then think about customers like way down the road. So I like that people are changing like that approach. And then of course, applications wise, like that's all anyone talks about now. Like if you're talking to a DeFi
Yeah.
protocol, everyone's always talking about why people are going to use it and how much order flow they expect to see, from where, who they're going to take it from, if there's new people coming into the space, why they're going to use this application. Like it's entirely user focused. as it should be. Like if you got pitched Netflix years back and they were not pitching why people would be, I guess at the time it was renting videos basically, but streaming it to come, like you'd be like, why are you pitching this to me? So it's good that crypto is making that shift to pitching applications the same way that like applications have been historically pitched. In terms of like people who've done it well, it's a good question. I think I mean, definitely in the Solana space, I think there are a lot of founders who always emphasize like user experience and emphasizing like why people will use this. So I think like looking at why Solana stood out in the last few like years, I think it's largely that focus. I think Ave's done a great job of it. I think Morpho's done a great job. All of these teams that people just like use all the time religiously, it's because of their focus on user experience. And so there's a lot of good examples, honestly, out there. It's hard to honestly think of like, specific names because I've just seen so many people actually like embrace this, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy that one project can actually, cause this entire market-wide shift. It just seems like teams are literally shifting so hard towards revenue in the early stage side, but also in those that are in their development cycle already. So,
Yep.
looking forward to seeing it. Last one for you, Dougie. Before you go, your Twitter bio is "Live Free or Die," which is ironically the
Yes, sir.
official state motto of New Hampshire, which is not really talked about as a crypto hub so much. But I'm not sure if you're a resident, but who are the top minds in the space from the Granite State? Is there anybody that would surprise us? Is New Hampshire the slept on crypto hub, or just where you call home, man?
Yeah, I'm born and raised in New Hampshire. Very proud. There's no name for New Hampshire people, but New Hampshire, right? I guess is what maybe it would be. And I also just like very largely identify with that ethos. Like it's definitely part of what got me into crypto. Like New Hampshire is just a very libertarian state, and crypto definitely was founded on libertarian roots, especially like Bitcoin, at least a lot of the same ideologies. So it's just like it's two birds, one stone. It's a statement that I love, but also where I'm from. So just proud to represent New Hampshire because it's a small state, and honestly, there's not that many like famous people from New Hampshire outside of like Adam Sandler. In terms of crypto, I would say that there is not a huge like crypto community in New Hampshire. Hopefully, one day there will be. It's definitely mostly Bitcoiners, I would say, and it's because of that like libertarian associations that I was just talking about. Like a lot of people who are from New Hampshire just like are anti-government. They're very anti just like centralization. Like it's just like a decentralized culture in a lot of ways. So people just love Bitcoin for that reason. There are people that I know who are from New Hampshire who are very smart people. I don't know of anyone who's like widely known in our space from New Hampshire. But hopefully at least one of us can make it big, and then like that'll be New Hampshire's claim to fame, and maybe we can like bring more people to leave wherever they're from and come to New Hampshire. But there's not really any major cities, so it's a bit tough to like be there because of the lack of that. So yeah, more to come hopefully for New Hampshire and crypto. Like the roots are there because the foundation ideologically is like so crypto aligned. It's crazy. And a lot of people I know, like disproportionately high number of people I know from New Hampshire own Bitcoin. So that's a start at least. We're getting there.
Yeah.
There we go.
It's just a matter of time. You're doing your part.
Yeah, I will forever represent New Hampshire. So that's my job.
Thanks for joining us, Dougie. It's been a pleasure, man. We'll have to link it in the city, and if not, come to Cannes, man. It should be a blast. It'll be fun.
Yes, sir. Will do. Appreciate it, guys. Great chatting.
All right, buddy.
Likewise.
See you soon.
Thanks, Dougie. See you.
Peace. Revenue, man. Everybody wants revenue. If you don't have revenue, you're out. Going out back. Let's see if Lawrence has some revenue. Let's be the first question. Lawrence, where's your revenue?
Yeah, we're gonna get Lawrence unmuted in the meet so we can hear him, and then we're gonna bring him up on stage as well. Where's your revenue, Lawrence?
Lawrence, man, good to see you, man.
How's it going?
Gotta get you unmuted. We'll get you going. Hold on.
There
He's
we
keeping
go.
the revenue hostage. There we go.
There we go. I'm afraid to tell you all that there is no revenue. The revenue is gonna.
The revenue is
How are
gone.
you guys? I'm actually lucky to say that there is revenue for Wildcat. When we decided to launch the V2, it was like, right, the fee switch goes on, come what may, and like we're currently watching it through DeFi Llama's page. Makes me very, very happy, truth be told.
Yeah.
Wow. So wait, so when you were pitching your investors, did you pitch them on revenue?
No, it was very much that we knew that it was going to happen anyway, because if you don't have it on, then you end up with the will they, won't they forever, right? So it wasn't even a thing that came. Hang on, just got back.
No, you're all good.
You're good. You're good.
It wasn't even a discussion that came up with investors, really. Like normally when people talk about things, it's kind of like the value that's added or like potential like network accrual of anything that like happens down the line, rather than how much are you going to be producing in terms of multiples. It's not really something that came up, or at least if it has, I've memory wiped it.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So because we just had a early stage GP from a fund, Dougie from Figment on, and we were just talking about how in the landscape now raising, like there's been a stark change in the way that builders are approaching VCs, right? And thinking about, okay, like there's no longer like we'll figure it out type of mentality. It's very much no, like it's here. So
yeah, I think like you can see a bunch of discussions that pop up about potential multiples. In terms of like what you reckon that you can produce, like where you are at a given stage, where you think you can get to. But by and large, I think there is still also a lot of art and science in kind of projecting that forward, especially when it comes to valuations of companies that work in crypto. And I think the most honest answer that you can give is, especially if you're fairly early stage, like Wildcat is in its current iteration, you just kind of have to go, well, let's have our scale first. Let's have the revenue stream in place and see where it gets to. And then you can kind of work out what, like, the narrative that you want to tell, or the story that you want to kind of like put forward in terms of like revenue, in terms of multiples, like comes from that, right? It's all storytelling at the end of the day.
yeah. All right. Well, kind of zooming out from that, Lawrence, you were just at ETH Ireland.
I was indeed.
And we had an interesting take here from a fellow builder in the space who tweeted that Ethereum has lost to Solana on the events side. No, this is not engagement bait.
It's close to rage bait. I'll give you that.
So what is your take on that? Has Ethereum lost to Solana on the event side?
I think it really depends on what you're looking for in an event, right? If you're looking for large venues, kind of glitzy stages, and general like polish, then I would give you that. I've always enjoyed how ETH Denver, whilst incredibly well put together, is also, you can see that it's put together by kind of passionate amateurs is the best way to do it. ETH Island is a really good example of something that has real railroad network energy. It's hosted in tunnels underneath a startup lab. And it's small, right? Like the maximum capacity for the event is something like 100, 150. Whereas if you go to a Solana event, it's going to be in some, bug shit sized like aircraft hangar, or like some beautiful kind of expo center in the middle of some, like passionately decorated country. And I think that's fine. I've been involved in tech for long enough now that I kind of get to see past the glitz of it all. And sure, if you're going for BD or networking purposes, then I would probably say that just given the network effects in Solana, then yeah, sure, like as an event, that means it's one. But if you're kind of going for maybe cypherpunk principles, or you are looking to mess around with something quite niche in terms of like on Ethereum's like roadmap, or like with like cryptography rather than just products, then Ethereum still beats Solana stuff hands down. Now, that's not to say that I would not go to Solana events. I just haven't like had the opportunity to go to something like Breakpoint. But my stated preference is still ETH events, and maybe I look like a fool for that.
No, man, I think you have some incredible lore, man. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. What is the lore around Lawrence? How did that get started?
I think the most obvious one was so I previously worked with another co-founder of mine at Wildcat on a product called Index Finance, which was tokenized ETFs. And that was attacked by an 18-year-old Canadian after about a year of operation. $16 million was stolen. Now, I think the first kind of bump in visibility was, because I'd previously been mostly anonymous before that, was that we were the first people to identify a DeFi attacker. So this was a couple of months before Abraham Eisenberg self-reported Mango Markets. So, that's like, but like, no one does that for clout. And that became like a real tearing moment about, do you believe in Coder's law? the same arguments that Abraham like busted out a couple of months later. And then shortly after that, as a joke, Alicia Katz, who was at the time head of marketing at Euler, had made a joke about how I was the worst trader in history. And in response, I said that I was going to destroy her protocol. And 6 weeks later, Euler was attacked. So
you're not claiming responsibility.
I didn't claim anything. I was having a nap with my, at the time, 10-day-old daughter. And I wake up to my phone
Very
buzzing
wholesome.
like it was in an earthquake. To an image from Hasaka, you know, the guy standing outside the SEC on the phone.
Yes.
Like, I have no idea
yes.
what's happened here. So then I ended up picking up this reputation of every hack that ever happened was somehow my responsibility, or like, you know, I'd had a hand in it. Which has admittedly made for some fairly funny conversations when you actually go about, like, because obviously I then subsequently went and built Wildcat with Dylan and a bunch of others. And yeah, the conversations that arise from that are entertaining, to say the best. They're like, yes, one way to make sure that your protocol is secured is like to get the world's most notorious crypto hacker and have him build his own thing.
That's what they say, is that if you can't hack it, even if you wanted to, then it must be secure.
Yeah, many are saying this.
Man, the lore runs deep.
Part of this lore is that you have this group chat called West Ham.
I do have a group called West Ham.
We're just curious, who decides who joins West Ham? Who are the most surprising people in the group? How do you get kicked out?
It's me in my glorious role as eternal dictator of the group chat. We briefly tried politicizing and creating a committee and decided that everyone was bad at it. I'm not going to tell you who's in it. I will tell you that you get kicked out by posting particularly soy takes about Solana. It's a pretty tough bar, and to be fair, I have recently been flooding it with a bunch of people from East Dublin. I'm very much just everyone, like, I've got real recency bias in terms of who I add. I find it really funny because someone came up to me the other day and they said, while I was in Dublin, and said, you know, who are you? And I explained my background as an engineer, and then I mentioned the group chat, and they go, oh, you're the West Ham guy. And I was like, oh, that's it? That's my legacy? The shitty group chat? Like, not the years and years of engineering? Oh, okay.
Let's talk Wildcat, man.
Yes.
Let's just start with some of the marketing. You guys have a very unique vibe on the marketing and comm side. Is that your doing, or why do you think that's the right type of marketing to attract the users that you guys want?
It's mostly me on the content, and then we have Shizi Ozawa on the arts. So the, you know, at present, beyond the occasional like sponsored post or we're going to be going to X or Y place, then it is mostly me in the back. In terms of whether we think that's the correct approach or not, I would not go so far as to say that much thought has gone into it. I happen to know crypto Twitter pretty well. I happen to know kind of how that works in terms of like what people respond to. We haven't even named the mascot. It's just kind of engaging in a way that's like entertaining. I'm not naturally a PR person or a marketer. It's just, well, I'm just rolling with it, because I keep saying this in conversations recently, that crypto has this really weird information problem where you can build the coolest thing in the world, but due to the nature of like how it's deployed and how it spreads, if no one knows about it, then you might as well have not built it at all. And I think this is a real many such cases thing. Like, I've seen some amazing stuff that's deployed on chain, but just no one's cognizant of the fact that it exists. So it might as well not be there. And so, at least while leaning into kind of this initial wave of Wildcat publicity, to just kind of insert itself into conversations in ways that, again, like I know from like learned experience, managed to like resonate. But I imagine that down the line, I will end up being sanded off, and I will not be allowed to kind of post the quasi-horny mascot doing something about 69 million in TVL. I may lose that gem yet.
Oh man, you know what's funny is that on the complete other side of the spectrum, we had Robinson from Wormhole on today, and he was talking about the interest from large funds and institutions in private credit markets and in credit markets on chain. And so you guys have built a uniquely, inspired product from what I think was a lot of what people in, DeFi summer kind of wanted, was just this next level of credit expansion with regards to current lending in the space has been pretty much restricted to over-collateralized. meaning,
Yes.
right, you have to have some sort of LTV, put up capital to be able to borrow against it. But I remember thinking back in the day, like late 2020, like, wow, if we want to keep this thing going, we need more credit and we need, under-collateralized credit. I always thought it was a problem of KYC, problem of on-chain identity. But it seems like you guys have solved it with the soul-bound with the soul-bound token being in the debt token,
Yep.
and then these kind of like week-long withdrawal cycles. Maybe you could just walk us through how a life cycle of a transaction works on Wildcat, and where the demand you're seeing comes from.
I will start by saying that, crypto has needed credit expansion for the longest time, and it did have it in the previous cycle, but it was all really opaque. And no market in the history of the world got nuked as hard percentage-wise than like the crypto credit on-chain market. It just got absolutely devastated. The global financial crisis market did not get hit, did not take as much of a beatdown as the one that we did. And so what I'd always wanted to build was a fairly bare metal, under-collateralized or unsecured, depending on like parameters that you pick, market, right? The Tinder for private credit, where effectively borrowers are making RFQs to say like, this is what I'm looking for. I can potentially put up some collateral, here is some information to allow you to underwrite. I guess air swap for credit is another one that perhaps doesn't like cause the head to tilt quite so much from people that hear it. But by and large, what ends up happening is a borrower that's present on Wildcat, who will like at this stage just look institutional, so a market maker, a fund, perhaps a DeFi foundation. Like it's an entity that you'll at least know or will be able to look up for. Gets to create a market parameterized however they want. So, how much they want to borrow, what asset of it, what interest rate they're willing to pay, minimum deposits, whether there's, if it's a revolving or a fixed facility, whether the debt is soul bound, all of these things, right, which creates this frontier that you can present to the market of everyone, you, me, everyone else, capital allocators in Singapore, family offices, and go, does this work for you? And there are going to be parties that create markets the way for which it does. Maybe those as retail or just allocators that look at, say, the Aave or the Euler rates for USDC and go, no, I'd like to go a bit further out on the risk curve. One of the other parameters, as you say, is you get to pick like how long do I have to honor my requests. So if you're a party like a large market maker, you maybe, you just have a constant engine of an ops team. You're like, okay, we'll do this in 24 hours. We'll just honor any request in 24 hours. If you're slightly smaller, you may say like a week, 2 weeks. It's very much an a la carte credit facility. Like it's very unopinionated about how it handles this. It just treats itself as the settlement mechanism. Like this is where the debt is created. This is how it's transferred. This is where you like receive it, which is great for a whole bunch of operational reasons, which I will not spoke off about on this call. But, I think going to your point, I felt the same way in late 2020 when DeFi Summer got started. I got really excited about, about your Aaves, whatever. I said I worked as an advisor to Euler, so I clearly put my money where my mouth is on this front. But in terms of expanding the broad money supply, we need something like Wildcat. Like there is no kind of relative comp to it that exists right now, which is a good thing, and also makes it hard to go, well, we're like X, because there isn't another X right now. The private credit golden bull run bro thesis was proven right. We are seeing it's about $114 million in capital being extended right now through Wildcat across a couple of borrowers. I said the names of which you'll know. Up only from here, I suspect. Kind of, crypto won. Like we won. We got what we wanted in terms of institutional acceptance and adoption. It may not be what everyone wanted, and sometimes I go, was it what I wanted when I got started? But no one gets to say that like allocation and involvement in financial markets is not present anymore. And TradFi's greatest weapon is credit. So it's foolish for us to have not attempted, or at least given it a solid attempt to kind of integrate that same mechanic into the same like DeFi engine that we work in all the time now, hence Wildcat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the alternative economy was something that I think a lot of people foresaw. That vision is turning to reality. We have Bitcoin and stablecoins as peer-to-peer electronic cash. We now have peer-to-peer electronic credit as a result of smart contracts being layered on top of these cash primitives. And I think one thing that, kind of escaped people for a long while, and just one more question about Wildcat's mechanism, is like liquidations. Because over collateralized, that the cash is there, you put it in a smart contract, you can take it. How does Wildcat's liquidation mechanism work since these loans are under-collateralized?
So there isn't a liquidation mechanism as such, right? Mostly because when you're dealing with, like, if you're looking at something like one of these platforms like Euler, then generally it's going to be you're depositing one asset, you're borrowing another, right? So like your oracles are involved. That's generally where the liquidation comes from, especially as it relates to LTVs. Wildcat at present, in the form that you look at today, everyone is opting mostly for completely unsecured lending. You can change other parameters that like increases the capital reserve ratio, but for the most part, everyone's like, well, that tweaks my effective APR. So I'm just going to basically allow myself to, in the market that I set up, borrow every single dollar that I have, and there's nothing sitting there backing it. Now, there is explicit legal agreements that you can tie to these, but even if not, it's not as if a court will not impose an agreement in the event of default anyway. And Wildcat goes to great lengths in the terms of use to specify this is explicit credit. You don't get to make any Coder's law arguments here. It says what a default is. It's one of the reasons why we focus on the institutions instead, because it's a lot harder for like an institution to just disappear into the phantom zone. Right. Now, with that said, we're about to introduce a feature which allows for arbitrary collateralization. So if you have a market where you're borrowing, say, USDC, you'll be able to back it with, 0 to 400, 5,000% of, say, Aave, Stargate, wrapped Ether, Coinbase wrapped Bitcoin, Trump win if you wanted to, like anything that hasn't chain market. And that is going to be really interesting because I think what you find with people that are borrowing on platforms like Aave and Euler and Morpho is if they're doing so for like realizing liquidity, they do always have that liquidation risk that's in like related to price, right? They post a bunch of Coinbase wrapped Bitcoin. Someone posts some like dumb tweet talking about releasing home equity in order to release to buy some Bitcoin at a 9% rate, and everyone like panic sells. Lo and behold, you're liquidated, right? If we do this through Wildcat, then the liquidation vector becomes time rather than price. So you specify how long you have to honor that call, right? And so like the liquidation mechanism is very implicit because it's not as if there's anything necessarily sitting there to be liquidated. You do end up finding yourself, like in the case where someone has actually just stiffed you on the loan, you do have to resort to a legal system. But let's be honest at this point, I said crypto won, but so did the legal systems that like govern this stuff. It's not as if there are courts that aren't looking at digital asset default cases and going, well, this is out of our jurisdiction. And to a degree, that is kind of how it has to be. It's already present on the lender side, where if you're as a borrower, you wanted to have like only KYC lenders, you could specify a policy that said, something to assess to on chain. I think the silly example I give is you can only lend to a particular market if you have a Milady in your wallet, right? That you could extend that very easily to something like a ZK Pass or some kind of proof or identity like token that's sitting in your wallet. On the borrower side, I think it's a lot further out on the risk curve to have someone who is seeking to borrow 10K in order to kind of finance a car payment or a mortgage down payment. That's not to say that there wouldn't be people that are, willing to do that. But I'm also very security conscious. And I think that, at least for the borrowers that are there, like they're able to put forward their legal, like full name of identity, like their address of their like institution. It's a lot riskier if you're basically saying, hey, you can use Wildcat as a person. Where's your address? We're posting it publicly. I would pay a lot more than I could borrow on Wildcat for my address to not be put out there tied to the addresses that I want. There are mechanisms that we're thinking about for this that are a bit more privacy preserving or kind of vaultified or pooled, but it's going to be a little while down the line before we get there.
Lawrence, oh yeah, go ahead, Andy. I just have one more.
A large part of it is just a function of time and awareness, right? I think the demand from borrowers, institutional borrowers who are looking to access capital that is easy to kind of get to, regardless of rate, is effectively infinite, even in the presence of real interest rates, right? If you're a fund that's able to turn around 30% on your stables, then basically borrowing as much as you can up to 20, provided that you can give enough information for people to underwrite, your bid is infinite. And so we're already speaking to a bunch of, like, beyond the ones that are already present on the Wildcat platform, a bunch of names that you know and recognize who are sitting there, like, kind of, scoring us internally, just like making sense of the protocol and how it works, that are eventually going to burst out and start asking for amounts as well. And again, like, based on the names, it is going to be a very easy sell for, like, come 6 months from now, Wildcat is going to be the place where everyone, like, or at least the name everyone refers to when you talk about private credit on chain. That's also not to say that, again, like, to looping back to how crypto won, like, all of these capital allocators that are sitting in places that kind of didn't typically get involved in crypto, but now finally have, like, they've got a little bit of stablecoin exposure. There's a weird whisper network that's kind of taking place amongst the borrowers that exist, or lenders that are already there going, well, this is working for us. Have you considered deploying capital there as well? And so, everyone goes, well, what do you think the max cap of this? I'm like, the max cap of, like, credit as a whole is sitting in the trillions. And I think, to name something like that is just like pure San Franciscan, like, VC rot. So, like, I certainly think you're talking in the scale of billions. I also think it's not going to just be Wildcat that's going to be playing in this pool in the next couple of months and years. This is far too valuable a market and far too valuable a primitive to leave completely untrammeled just for us to have by ourselves. But again, like, as the scars of the previous cycle start to heal and everyone goes, on-chain credit was still important. It never stopped being important, but we just got damaged so badly. Everyone will be coming back. The entities that were borrowing in the past, the deployers that were there. Again, it's time and it's just name recognition. It will eventually not just be me doing the GTM. We're expanding on that front as we speak, and it's time to go to TradFi and tell them to start putting their money in our alternative economy.
Yeah, and that's happening right before our eyes, and you guys are leading the charge. So it's incredibly impressive to see. I think that's about all the time we have. Lawrence, thank you so much for coming on. It was an absolute pleasure, and I'd love to pick this up another time as Wildcat continues to proliferate.
Yeah, absolutely love to as well. Thank you very much.
Cheers. See you next time. Thanks, Lawrence.
Thank you very much. Cheers, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Yeah. I mean, peer-to-peer is the name of the game. Electronic is the name of the game. We're innovating on a system that has been around for thousands of years and hasn't really changed in hundreds of years. So I think, again, peer-to-peer cash, electronic cash, peer-to-peer electronic credit is where we're headed, and that's happening right before our eyes. We host these teams and founders that are building it, and it's a pleasure learning from them and broadcasting that knowledge right back to you guys.
Do you remember the price of Bitcoin when we started, Rob?
I don't, but we didn't say higher or lower today.
It's at
So
106.66. All right. Well, guys, thanks for joining us, Rob. Great stream. Good guests, good topics, and we'll see you guys later in the week.
Let's do it. Thanks, guys.